Our readings for this fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time focused on the reality of suffering. We suffer in varied ways. Some of us suffer physiologically, masakita. Some of us are sick, are not well in terms of our relationship with ourselves, with somebody else, with the family members, with our co-workers and office mates, with our neighbors. So physiological, relational. Some also are psychological. Some of us do not have a good sleep at night. It can be in relation to some addictions and dependencies. But the sickness can also be moral and spiritual. We are living in sin and we are having a spiritual crisis. We have so many questions and whys towards God, and until now remain unanswered. And they caused sufferings to us. That is why, humanly speaking, or in the eyes of the world, suffering is something that as much as possible we want to avoid. We don't want to get sick in different forms, in different ways. Would it be physiological, psychological, relational, moral, or spiritual? As much as possible, we don't want to be sick because it drains us financially. It drains our time. It drains our energy. And we see suffering as a problem. And because it is a problem, we seek for solutions. But our readings for today look at suffering in a totally different manner. There is a spiritual vision that is being used in looking at suffering. Suffering from the biblical perspective is not just a problem to be solved. It is a mystery. It is a mystery that we can understand, but the more we understand it, the more there is to be understood. It is something that is inexhaustible. We cannot totally grasp the purpose, the meaning, and the existence of suffering. And because it is a mystery, the invitation is not to find solutions, but to find meaning. And meaning can only be discovered not by avoiding suffering, but by entering into it. And in our readings, we have people who really entered into the reality and mystery of suffering. In the first reading, we have Job. Job is someone who was living in abundance. But Satan said to God, let us try to see and test if the faith of this man to you is strong enough. And God agreed. Okay, let us allow Job to be tested. And the test was in the form of suffering. Slowly and gradually, Job, who was living in abundance, experienced poverty. Hinay-hinay, gikuha sa iya ang iyang mga kabtangan. Namatay ang iyang mga binuhi. And even members of his family died. And then Job was sick. And like anyone else, anybody else, when we are sick, we question God. Lord, where are you? Lord, why am I suffering? Lord, for how long will I suffer? When we suffer, we ask so many questions to God. But you see, God remains silent to the questions of Job. Because God knows that Job will be able to enter into the very mystery of suffering if he will not hear the answers of God immediately. But what happened is, in the silence of God, Job turned to his friends for answers. And they offered answers. But the answers led to more questions. Job really suffered. And then he turned to God again. But the answer of God to Job's suffering was in the form of a question. God asked Job, Job, where were you when I created the world? God is telling Job, your questions are easy questions. You need to ask more difficult questions. There are still questions that you have not asked Job. And in this dialogue between Job and God, God is telling Job, there are still many things that you need to learn and understand. And it is through suffering that you will come to understand the deeper questions of life. And then, to cut it short, when everything was taken from Job, Job declared these words. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job knew through suffering that everything is a gift. Everything is a gift. And God can take it anytime and in any way He wants. But the greatest gift that Job received was the realization that when everything is taken away, the Lord continues to care and love him. And that is the greatest gift that satisfies the heart of Job more than the abundance of life, more than anything else. Having the Lord as the center of his life is the source of the deepest satisfaction of his heart. In the second reading, we have Paul, the apostle. And in our second reading, Paul considered preaching as a ministry. And he sees preaching as the only thing that matters in his life. Meaning to say, if he will not preach, his life will be meaningless. His life will be useless. This is the only thing that matters to him. This is the only thing that gives purpose and meaning in his life. And so, he considers preaching not as a profession where he can gain something, where he will receive a good salary. He looks at preaching as a vocation. Preaching is not something he chose. Preaching is something that chose him. Preaching is a call. It is a call from someone who loves him. And it is a call in which he freely responded. And he considered it as a vocation. And because it is a vocation, the real reward is not on the salary, is not on what he will receive, but the satisfaction is experienced in the giving of self in this preaching ministry. No matter what will happen to his life, no matter how much he will suffer in the process. And he did suffer. He was shipwrecked for 3 times. He was imprisoned not less than 3 times. And the last imprisonment was in Rome. Ugunya dito sa Roma, dito siya giputlan sa iyang liog ug namatay. He suffered a lot. But he saw suffering as the key, as the reality for him to enter into the beauty and vocation of preaching. The most meaningful decision in life for every one of us is not on having chosen a job with the biggest salary, but the one in which we will find the greatest satisfaction. That is why being married is not a profession. You are not being paid by the number of times that you change the diapers of your children, by the number of times you wash their clothes, you went to work, the amount of time and energy and money you have spent for them. No. Being parents is a vocation. That is why after a long day, after taking care of your children, even a smile can be the source of your greatest satisfaction. A smile of a child. You can feel the gratitude of the child when the child smiles at you. When you see your child growing, when you see them passing during graduation time, when you are able to see them making decisions, responsible decisions in life. For you who are teaching, it's natural for a teacher to find a school in which you will be provided with a higher salary. That's fine. But more than that, teaching is a vocation. The greatest satisfaction is not when you receive your salary. The greatest satisfaction of a teacher is when you see the eyes of your students sparkle because they understood the lesson. Right? When you discover that they studied hard because they enjoyed the learning process in the school, because they see someone who is very dedicated and willing to suffer to impart the knowledge that students need to understand. Politicians, you don't feel the greatest satisfaction in the salaries you receive, or in the perks that you receive. No. You feel satisfaction if the project you have done, you have built, the gymnasium and the basketball court that you have built without corruption. You see the youth playing there. When the funds that you use so that the quarantine area will be livable for those who are recovering, that will satisfy your hearts. That is why Pope Francis said, politics is a lofty vocation. It is not a profession. It is a vocation. And St. John Paul II once said, the deepest and most authentic meaning of life is that of being a gift, which is fully realized in the gift of self, in the giving of self. Whether you are a mother, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a priest, whether you are a choir, a lector, an office worker, a businessman, the greatest satisfaction is not on the salary or the profit. The greatest satisfaction comes from the giving of self. When one day you realize that you are making a difference in the lives of people. And that is what Jesus did in the gospel. He healed the sick. He cured the sick. He expelled demons. And in doing that, he was proclaiming of the reign of God. When Jesus healed the sick, he was not just healing the sick so that they will recover. He was actually proclaiming that God's power is more powerful than sickness, than suffering. And that is the good news. And he did not heal everyone. He went to other villages to preach and to heal other people who were sick. He did not heal everyone because suffering has a purpose. Suffering can draw us closer to God. Suffering will make us realize the value of relationships in the family, where you are willing to let go of your properties just to save someone, a member of the family who is confined in the hospital. In suffering, we realize what is really important in life. There were two blood sisters. One is very healthy, but the younger one is paralyzed and cannot walk. So they saved money because they wanted to go to a pilgrimage in Lourdes and to pray there and to immerse this paralyzed sister to this miraculous water. And then they were able to do it. But after the immersion, they came out from the water with the younger sister still paralyzed. And they said, the miracle did not happen. But when they were about to leave the shrine, something happened to the elder sister, the one who was healthy. She knelt down, and with all her tears, and at the top of her voice, heard by her younger paralyzed sister, she said, Lord, from now on, I will carry my sister. I will be her feet. Og dili nako siya pasagdan for the rest of her life. The miracle happened not to the paralyzed sister. The miracle happened to the sister who was gifted with health. And what a gift! What a precious gift! More than anything else, how beautiful to live a life where I can serve as the feet of someone else who cannot walk. And that is why suffering is a mystery. We don't have to solve suffering totally. Yes, we address sickness. Yes, we do something about it. But more than and above all the solutions that we employ, we know by heart that suffering has a purpose. Suffering has a meaning. Suffering will draw us closer to the people we love. And ultimately, it will draw us closer and closer to God. That is why when people ask me, Bishop, are you now cancer-free? I just smiled, and deep inside my heart I say, it doesn't matter whether I am cancer-free or not. What matters most is, even if I have cancer, I will continue to give my life every day to the church, to the diocese that God has entrusted me. And every day I will do that, even if I suffer, even my body feels the pain. Because the greatest satisfaction of every person does not come from anything that we receive. The greatest satisfaction comes from the giving of oneself to make a difference in everyone's life, so that they will feel that God is with them, that the reign of God is really coming or has come. May we continue to live a life for others, especially those who suffer. And those of us who suffer, may we accept suffering and consider suffering as a mystery. Not something that we totally solve, but something that we enter into and discover its meaning, its purpose, and appreciate that it is doing something good for us, for everyone in the family, for everyone whom we encounter in our lives. Amen. Let us all rise.